Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted the most? Imagine being sold, forgotten, and later governing the very nation that imprisoned you. The story of Joseph of Egypt, recorded in Genesis chapters 37 through 50, is one of the most cinematic narratives in the Bible. It's a life spanning 110 years, 17 as a spoiled son, 13 as an enslaved man and unjustly jailed prisoner, then 80 years as the second most powerful man in the entire world. It's a perfect picture of envy, pain, and great injustice. But it's also a story of God's absolute faithfulness, even in the deepest darkness. Get ready to see how God turns a cistern into a palace and a prison into promotion. Smash that like button right now if you want to see this impossible comeback. What you are about to hear is not just history. It's a living lesson for your life today. Stay with me until the very end. In the ancient land of Canaan, the patriarch Jacob loved his son Joseph more than all his other children. This was already a major problem in their complex family. Joseph was the son of his beloved Rachel, and he was only 17 years old when this entire situation began. This extreme favoritism was obvious to everyone in the family, causing major friction and resentment among the brothers. Jacob made Joseph a coat of many colors with long sleeves, a direct symbol of his inheritance and distinction. The 10 older brothers looked at that coat, and their envy turned into poisonous hatred for the younger sibling, Genesis 37. Then, Joseph started having prophetic dreams that, honestly, he probably shouldn't have shared with them. He told them the first dream, they were in the golden wheat field, and his brother's sheaves bowed down to his sheaf. The second dream was even more audacious. In the starry night sky, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowed down before Joseph. Even Jacob rebuked him. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come to bow down to the ground before you?" The brothers' hatred had reached a boiling point of no return, preparing them for an act of pure betrayal. The hatred soon turned into a wicked and terrible plan. Jacob, completely unsuspecting, sent Joseph to check on his brother's flocks in Shechem. Joseph walked about 60 kilometers until he finally found the entire group in Dothan. "Here comes the dreamer," they exclaimed as they saw him approaching in the desert distance. The initial plan was outright murder, kill Joseph and throw his body into a cistern nearby. Reuben, the eldest, tried to intervene, secretly planning to rescue the boy later when they weren't looking. When Joseph arrived, the cruelty exploded. They grabbed him, ripped off the colorful coat and threw him into a dark cistern. Imagine Joseph's terror. In the cold, damp cistern, he cried out desperately for help, but no one listened. Genesis 42. The brothers, with shocking indifference, sat down to eat bread, completely ignoring his distress in the pit. But what a twist! A caravan of Ishmaelites appeared on the horizon, merchants heading straight to Egypt. Judah intervened with a cruel pragmatism. "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood?" They pulled him from the cistern, shackled his hands, and sold him for 20 pieces of silver, the price of a slave. Joseph, chained, began the long, dusty journey toward the land of the Pharaohs, far away from home. The scene is one of deep drama and dishonor. The brothers gathered to fabricate the lie that would keep their crime hidden. They killed a young goat from the herd and dipped the colorful coat into the animal's dark, fresh blood. They took the forged evidence to their father, Jacob, who was waiting in his tent in Canaan. They presented the bloody coat. "Do you recognize this?" The silence in the tent was shattered by Jacob's wail. He touched the fabric with trembling hands, recognizing the heirloom and feeling the dried blood. The father's lament was heartbreaking. "Surely Joseph has been torn to pieces." Genesis 37. Jacob tore his own garments, put on sackcloth, and refused to be comforted by any of his sons. The patriarch spent years in the darkness of grief, convinced his beloved son was dead. He declared, "You will make me go down to the grave mourning." Meanwhile, Joseph was chained, heading to Egypt. What a dramatic turn, right? From the bright coat to the dark cistern, this story is a crazy emotional roller coaster. Joseph fell exactly when he was doing what was right and being completely faithful to God. Tell me in the comments, brother, what's the biggest lesson you take from this betrayal? The God of Joseph turns a cistern into a palace. Interacting doesn't cost a thing. Joseph arrived in Egypt and was taken to the slave auction, where Egyptian luxury contrasted with his simple clothing. He was bought by Potiphar, the influential captain of Pharaoh's guard, a powerful and feared man. Joseph decided to be faithful and worked with visible dedication, even as a slave. The Bible states, "The Lord was with Joseph," Genesis 39. Everything Joseph touched prospered. Supernatural success overflowed into his master's home. Potiphar quickly promoted him, making him chief administrator over his entire vast household. Joseph's blessing was so powerful that Potiphar worried about nothing except the food he ate. Joseph was a handsome man, appealing to the eye, which attracted unexpected danger. Potiphar's wife began the harassment, and the request was frequent, almost daily. "Lie with me." But Joseph's faithfulness was non-negotiable. He refused, using moral and spiritual arguments. "How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Genesis 39. The critical day arrived. The house was empty, and the woman violently grabbed his cloak, demanding he surrender. Joseph fled, leaving his cloak in her hands, choosing a clear conscience over sin. The cruel reversal. The victim became the accused. The woman screamed and fabricated a detailed, lying story of assault. Potiphar's rage, consumed by shame, blinded him to the truth. Joseph was pulled from trust and freedom and thrown into the king's prison, the royal jail. The setting changed, but the promise remained. The Lord, however, was with Joseph, Genesis 39. Even in the darkness of the jail, God's favor went with him, and the chief jailer noticed his competence. Soon, Joseph gained authority over the other prisoners, becoming responsible for the jail's management. Two high-ranking men arrived, the cupbearer and the baker. Both had offended the mighty Pharaoh. Both men dreamed on the same night, and Joseph, seeing them troubled, offered humble assistance. He calmed them with the wisdom of one who knew where the gift came from. Do interpretations not belong to God? Genesis 40. The cupbearer told his dream, the vine with 3 branches that bloomed, and he served the wine to Pharaoh. Joseph's interpretation, 3 days, and the cupbearer would be restored to his office. The baker told his dream, 3 baskets of white bread, but birds ate the delicacies. Joseph's interpretation was grim. 3 days, and the baker would be executed and hanged. Everything came true exactly, but the cupbearer, in his new freedom, completely forgot Joseph. Joseph spent 2 more full years in prison, a test of patience and being forgotten. 2 years later, God's timing began. The mighty Pharaoh dreamed twice and woke up distressed and deeply troubled. First dream, he was on the Nile's bank, and 7 handsome fat cows came out of the water, grazing in the reeds. But 7 ugly, very thin cows came out and devoured the fat ones, remaining thin. Second dream, a strange urgency, and 7 full good heads of grain sprouted, but 7 withered heads swallowed them completely. Pharaoh summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but no one could interpret the meaning. Genesis 41. The palace was in crisis. The fate of the greatest nation was at stake. The cupbearer finally recalled his faults and the young Hebrew in prison. Pharaoh ordered Joseph to be brought immediately. The order was urgent. Joseph was quickly shaved, changed clothes, and brought before the throne. Pharaoh, I had a dream. No one can interpret it. I heard that you interpret dreams. Joseph, with humility, replied, It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Genesis 41. Joseph heard the dreams and explained, They are one. They mean 7 years of abundant plenty, followed by 7 years of severe famine. The famine would be so great it would consume all the abundance. Joseph went further. He presented a complete plan. Appoint a wise man, establish supervisors, and store 20% of the harvest. Joseph's wisdom was so evident that Pharaoh and all his officials were amazed by the detailed plan. Pharaoh questioned, "Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God?" The decision was instantaneous. "Since no one is so wise and discreet as you, you shall be over my house." The investiture ceremony was epic and immediate. A slave's destiny changed in under 24 hours. Pharaoh removed his signet ring and put it on Joseph's hand, giving him total authority. He dressed him in fine linen and placed a gold chain around his neck. Joseph was placed in the second chariot of the kingdom, and the herald cried out in the streets, "Bow the knee!" The Hebrew slave received an Egyptian name, Zaphanath-Paneah. He married Asenath, daughter of the priest of On. Joseph was 30 years old when he became governor of Egypt, after 13 years since his sale, from forgotten to the second authority of the kingdom. Joseph took over the nation's management with discipline and the wisdom of God. The 7 years of plenty arrived, and Joseph traveled throughout Egypt, building a brilliant silo system. Joseph instituted a revolutionary law. 20% of every harvest, 1/5, would be stored in Pharaoh's treasuries. He built giant silos in every city in Egypt, strategically positioned. Joseph personally traveled throughout the entire nation, supervising the storage and logistics. The system was so efficient that the wheat accumulated became like the sand of the sea, beyond measure. Genesis 41. The firstborn, Manasseh, meaning God has made me forget my suffering. The second, Ephraim, meaning God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. The names revealed his deep inner healing. The 7 years of plenty ended. The severe famine began, affecting all the surrounding lands. Only Egypt was prepared because of Joseph's wisdom. The famine reached Canaan, and the suffering afflicted Jacob, who sent 10 sons on the first trip to buy grain in Egypt. Jacob refused to send Benjamin, fearing the loss of his last son by Rachel. The 10 brothers arrived in Egypt and were brought before the governor, bowing with their faces to the ground. Joseph recognized them. The dreams were coming true before his eyes, but they did not recognize him. His Egyptian beard, fine linen robes, and the Egyptian language disguised him. Joseph, tense, spoke harshly, using an interpreter. "You are spies." The brothers denied, and to prove their truthfulness revealed, "We are 12 brothers. The youngest is with our father, and one is no more." Joseph tested them. "One of you will remain here jailed, Simeon." He kept them jailed for 3 days. Then he decided, "Return with grain, but return with your youngest brother." The brothers spoke in Hebrew. "We are guilty concerning our brother. We saw his distress when he pleaded, and we would not listen." Joseph turned away to weep. He ordered their sacks filled with grain and commanded that each man's money be secretly returned inside their sacks. They discovered the money, and their hearts failed them in fear and terror. The food ran out in Canaan. Judah interceded, taking full responsibility for his brother. "I will be security for him. If I do not bring him back, then let me bear the blame forever." Jacob reluctantly agreed. The caravan prepared, carrying gifts, and finally, Benjamin. Upon arrival, Joseph saw Benjamin and was overcome with emotion. Joseph withdrew to his private room and wept alone, seeing his full brother after 23 years. The brothers were seated at the table by order of age, which utterly perplexed them. How did he know? The meal happened, but Egyptians ate at a separate table. It was an abomination to eat with Hebrews. Benjamin's portion was 5 times greater, a test of envy. The final test, Joseph ordered the steward, "Put my silver cup in the mouth of the youngest man's sack." The next morning, they departed, but the steward pursued them, confronting them about the stolen cup. The brothers denied it and swore, "If it is found with anyone, let him die." The cup was found in Benjamin's sack. In utter despair, they tore their clothes and returned to Joseph's house. Judah, weeping, offered to become a slave, but Joseph was unyielding. "Only the man found with the cup will be my slave." Judah stepped forward and began the most moving speech in Genesis. He recounted Jacob's grief, explaining that his father's soul was tied to Benjamin's soul. "When he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die." The final plea, "Please, let your servant remain in place of the boy as a slave to my lord." The one who once suggested selling Joseph now offered himself as a slave out of love. The revelation. Joseph could no longer control himself. He shouted, "Make everyone leave my presence." He wept aloud, so loud the Egyptians outside heard. In Hebrew, he spoke the words that paralyzed his brothers. "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" The brothers were terrified, speechless with fear. Joseph was radical in his forgiveness. "Do not be grieved, for God sent me before you to preserve life." Genesis 45. He kissed and wept over them all. "So it was not you who sent me here, but God." The reconciliation, after 23 years, was complete. News of the revelation reached Pharaoh, who rejoiced. Pharaoh sent Egyptian wagons and provisions for Jacob and the whole family. The brothers returned to Canaan and announced to Jacob, "Joseph is still alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt." Jacob's heart fainted, but seeing the wagons, the spirit of Israel revived. "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Joseph prepared his personal chariot for the meeting. Joseph met his father in Goshen. Seeing Jacob, he fell upon his neck and wept intensely for a long time. The embrace held decades of compressed longing. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen your face." The family settled in Goshen, the best land, and Joseph sustained them. Jacob lived 17 years in Egypt and died at 147 years old. Before dying, Jacob gathered the 12 sons and prophetically blessed them. Joseph lived to 110 years, seeing his grandchildren. His final prophetic words, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." Genesis 50. Here we conclude this epic journey. 17 years as the youngest, 13 years as a slave and prisoner, 80 years as governor of Egypt. His life teaches the central lesson, divine purpose in betrayal. "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Genesis 50. God used the brothers' cruelty to save millions of lives. Your pain has a greater purpose. Fidelity in obscurity. Joseph was faithful everywhere. His character was formed when no one was looking. Radical forgiveness transforms. Joseph broke the cycle of pain through forgiveness. His forgiveness ensured the survival and blessing of his entire family. Parallels with Jesus Christ are striking. Both beloved, rejected, betrayed for silver, and exalted after suffering. Joseph saved from physical hunger. Jesus saves from spiritual hunger. Joseph, God sent me to preserve life. Jesus, the Father sent me to save lives. Your cistern is not the end. Your prison is preparation. Your dreams will come true. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button now. Comment, what part impacted you most? The radical forgiveness or the reunion with the Father? Share this with someone in an unjust prison who needs to hear, your dreams will come true. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The God of Joseph is your God. Stay with God.